But it was only when someone who was in that, it was at Birmingham Rep, who was in that space, who looked like me, who understood the culture I was from, who read a story about our culture and said, this is something we need to see on stage. I felt so empowered at that moment. I don't even know if he knew like how much that kind of empowered me to move forward in my career.
Hello and welcome to the Leading Communities podcast, brought to you by Aspire for You CIC and produced by That's All Media CIC. We're on a mission to understand what it takes to help communities to start caring, keep caring, or care more about an issue.
Welcome to another episode of the Leading Communities podcast, a platform where we help develop discussions on topics vital to local communities, offering insights from both leadership perspectives and the community viewpoint. Join us as we explore the issues, stories, and experiences that shape our communities and inspire change. I'm pleased to say that I'm joined now by our guest, Ashlee Elizabeth-Lolo. She's a writer, a dramaturge, an award-winning journalist and drama practitioner from Birmingham, and is here to offer us insights on her journey through the industry and what she feels needs to change in order for others to take a better path. Thanks for joining me, Ashlee. How are you?
I'm really good today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. So, honey, I know there is a list. Like, there's been a journey. There has been a journey, and one that has put you currently in a great place. But let's just go back to the beginning.
Yes.
So that moment where you work out that actually I am a creative, I want a career in the creative industries. What was that for you?
So I had just gotten back from India. I went away for a 3-month placement. I got back, I was unemployed and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I stumbled across a company called Aspire for You, and I was offered some copywriting service jobs to kind of get into the habit of writing professionally for a living. And I loved it to a degree. It was really good, but I felt like creatively I wasn't being as, extensive as I could be with my creativity. So from there, I ended up being commissioned by a poem that I'd written in India, and that was commissioned by Birmingham City University. It was also commissioned at the same time by the Birmingham Rep Theatre and also the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. I don't know what happened there, but there was some blessing on their life there, who knows. And that actually kick-started my career. So that ended up becoming a play, and then that ended up being on at the Rep Theatre just for a while, and also allowing me to get onto writing schemes as well. So that's how everything kind of started, and that was in 2018, I want to say. So no, 2017, 2018, around those kind of times anyway. And it's just been up and up from there. There was different schemes that were happening at Tallowa Theatre in London. So I ended up doing a placement there and writing a play there as well. And once again, that was just a lovely experience being around like an all-black creative cast as well and crew. That was amazing. And then coming back to Birmingham and basically doing more plays, doing more kind of creative pursuits. And that's kind of what's led to what it's here today. It's just been constantly hustling, constantly getting creative opportunities. And I would probably say there was a period up until the pandemic where in my schedule at one point, there were no days off. And it was only because of the pandemic where I ended up actually taking a break. But actually at that point, it was doing facilitation workshops with young people. It was writing plays. It was doing stuff on radio. It was networking. All those kind of things happened in order to lead up to this point. So sometimes when I end up with imposter syndrome, I wonder why. Because actually I'm looking back thinking, oh my God, I've done so much to get here. Yeah. But yet still I'll doubt myself when I get in the room, always.
I get that and I hear it. So let's just talk about writing in terms of it being a career option, because there's lots of different types of writing. There's lots of different ways that people consider writing, whether it's journalistic, as you say, whether it's playwriting, whether it's facilitation and support in that way. Firstly, where would you say your love is in terms of the style and the type? And secondly, how does that play into what you have now done and how you've developed to this point?
Oh gosh, I would probably say my style starts with poetry first, then goes into playwriting. That's the style that I love the most. I wish I could make a full-time career out of that. And I'm being honest, because I feel like a lot of writers will end up doing things like facilitation, they'll end up leading or teaching workshops, but to make a career out of theatre full time is a difficult feat for anyone. So that's just something I need to put out there. That's definitely the style I've started with. I think where it's led me in terms of different avenues, I mean, it's led to journalistic opportunities, which is very strange because you're like, how do the two kind of link? It's led to poetic opportunities. It's led to, also a lot of creative opportunities for education as well. That's been like a nice crossover. But yeah, where I'm at the moment is I currently work at the Hippodrome Theatre as a drama practitioner and community coordinator. So once again, it's bringing young people involved in writing, in drama, and teaching them like the basic skills of drama so they can go along and make their own productions. And also as well, it's led to things like the BBC Voices programme, which I did this year. And once again, it's learning the art of screenwriting. So there's so many different things. It started off with poetry, but it's bled into so many different avenues and in ways I could never have expected. And if I'd have known that at school, I would have chosen that path versus trying to fit into some more corporate avenues. And actually, that was never meant for me. Actually, I was meant to be a creative. I just didn't know what the possibilities were going to be.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because I feel like when it comes down to creative opportunity, it is very difficult to carve out a path when it's not always clear. I mean, when was the first time for you that it became clear that as a person of colour, as a female, as probably all of the things that the industry doesn't always show up with, that actually there was a space for you?
Oh my gosh. I was in a room with a director called Daniel Bailey, and he read one of my scripts and he said, "You're a writer." And I was like, nah, I don't know about that. I can write a few things.
Yeah.
And once again, this imposter syndrome, I'd been writing journalistic articles since I was in university at that point. And I was still writing. I've been writing since the age of 13, technically. But like officially, I've been writing for quite a long time before that. But it was only when someone who was in that, it was at Birmingham Rep, who was in that space, who looked like me, who understood the culture I was from, who read a story about our culture and said, this is something we need to see on stage. I felt so empowered at that moment. I don't even know if he knew like how much that kind of empowered me to move forward in my career, but just hearing those words and then seeing other people, like I said, that were from my community in the building, making art, making money from the art, but also feeding back into the community, where I actually realised this is possible and I can actually make some level of change. It may not be, because in my head, I'm like, I'm going to dominate the world one day. It's probably not going to be on that level.
Well, why are we doubting?
I mean,
why?
But you know what? Because I feel like at the moment, there's been a slight shift in my wants, if I'm being honest. I feel like if you'd asked me that probably like 4 years ago, it'd be like, yeah, I want to be at this height. I want to be working for this building. I want to have this accolade. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, actually, I just want to make some change that's actually going to last in our community. Because there's been so many things that have been started by creatives that have fizzled out over the past couple of years. The pandemic being one of the reasons, but also just in the sense of funding losses and all these kind of things. And we also don't have a council properly anymore at the moment in Birmingham. So all those kind of things have just affected so many things. I just want something that is radically consistent in our community, that is based around creativity that people can access. And actually that feels more like success than just putting on a blockbuster like movie. I'm not saying that's not a great accolade because it will inspire people, but it's not the end goal.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes me think about how writing for you is a tool as well as a craft. What would you say to that?
Yeah. And you know what, to be fair, I think I learned this when I took a play to Edinburgh last year, and honestly, I never thought I'd ever get there. You know, I never thought it was ever going to be a possibility. But I feel like actually, even though like, you know, it was well received and it was, it was successful, actually the work I'm doing with communities and writing with communities, helping communities tell their stories, and also the confidence building that happens along the way in that journey, that feels important. Whereas once again, for me, self-glory doesn't feel like that's where I need to be. It doesn't feel like that's a better use of my talents. So I definitely feel like actually the tool is to bring people together, is to share stories, is to share experiences, and to feel like everybody has a voice. And if writing can do that, perfect. But if it's just all about one person's voice, that's not for me anymore. And I just didn't realise that until I, once again, tried to strive for what I thought was success, and then got there and realised, oh, is this really what I want? And once again, it wasn't the fact I'm not grateful for the experience. It was brilliant, and I've learned so much about that process. But I also was there thinking, I'm going to bring this back to my community and tell them what it's like. I'm going to make sure that they know how to get through the door. That was what my mindset was there, not just a case of, oh, I hope the Guardian give me 5 stars. That wasn't where my mindset was at. So it's always a tool to kind of bring people in, open the door and keep the door open, versus it just being a case of blurting creatively and actually it's just for you. It's not what writing's about, for me anyway.
What was that moment of, I thought this was success, but actually not quite what I want?
It was when the stars came in. And you know what? Because when you're in Edinburgh, it's such an interesting process. So you get there and you're currently not in a camp, I'm going to say. So you get there, you got your posters around, you're like, oh, okay, I've made it. But then you realise that actually, especially if you come there halfway through the actual process, you've got people that have been there since the beginning. So they've got their star ratings. So you've got the 1-star camp. Let's be quite frank, it's not great to end up in that one. Then you got the 2-star, which is like, oh God, this isn't great. The 3-star camp, which technically is like 7 out of 10.
Right.
But in Edinburgh, it's probably like a 5, right? Then you got the 4 and the 5-star camp. So when I first arrived, nothing. Then you end up getting the star ratings and you're reading other people's opinions of your piece and you're like, well, actually, you've completely misinterpreted that. Right. Or you actually haven't understood what this meant to a certain person in my community because you're not from that. And once again, it was a play that was accessible for everybody. So it wasn't just necessarily for Black Caribbean people. But at the same time, you haven't even taken the time to even research what this word meant before you wrote about it and called it XYZ. And once again, most of the reviews were fine. But then I was like, am I really going to base 5 years worth of work on one review by someone who turned up halfway through the show?
Yeah.
Things like that, it completely blew my mind. And even my producer at the time, her name's Emily Beecher, she said, what do you want out of Edinburgh? And I was like, and in my head, I wanted an agent, I wanted a transfer to London, I wanted all those things. And when I got there, I realised now what she was saying, like, what do you want? Do you want spiritual growth from this? Do you want to be able to feel like you can now go into a mainstay show and feel like you can handle yourself in a more kind of professional aspect? Do you want to be able to bring this process back to your community so they know what it's like when you get to Edinburgh? What do you want? It's not just a case of the star ratings, because it will be there and it will be gone tomorrow. Yeah. That's the nature of media. But actually, what is the long-lasting thing that you want from this process? It blew my mind. And once again, when those star ratings came in, and once again, especially if it's not what you expected as well, it just knocks your confidence. And actually, you can't put all your weight on that. And I learned a valuable lesson, very valuable lesson there.
Do you feel like, and maybe part of that experience informing this, that there are some stories that need to be told because actually you've got an audience that's not ready for it yet?
Oh, could I have an example of that, please?
Yeah, so for example, it might be a story that has, cultural resonance. And you're then in a space where you're telling a story in a space where you feel like this is the purpose for my story, this is the message I'm trying to send, but you're actually speaking to an audience that aren't even aware that there is a culture, never mind to have the resonance that sits behind it. And for that reason, it means that importance of opening the door and creating spaces for others to actually continue to push those stories through that door alongside yours in whatever setting is readying an audience, is preparing an audience, but at the same time then is elevating that audience to the point where they can receive.
Oh, wow, that is a powerful question. Yes, I completely hear what you're saying, because I felt like, especially when it came to the Black creatives in Edinburgh, I felt like all of us had the same cry, which is, there's no one. We prepared this play for audiences that were going to be diverse. The audience were not diverse. So, for example, there was a line in the piece which is basically about, basically kind of critiquing the fact that it's just all white audiences in a certain space, or you might feel like you're the only person of colour in an all white environment. And you're delivering that joke to an all-white audience. Now, they laughed, which was, thank God, but also at the same time, you could feel the challenge in their hearts. It was like, should we be laughing at this? Are we the problem right now? Oh my gosh. And it's not their fault that they can afford to go. Do you know what I mean? It's the industry that needs to change. But at the same time, that was a big eye-opener. So I think, especially when you are, And I think it's something that a lot of creators need to be prepared for in general. When you are creating a story that you want one community to understand, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to understand. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to be ready to take that message on. And that is a perpetual challenge that we have in our industry, because not everybody's going to be able to take that message and go, oh, I understood that straight away. Sometimes it's going to take a couple of years. It might be that they go away and actually, or for example, I'm thinking about so many plays I saw before BLM kicked off in 2020. Now they're prevalent. Now they mean something, because people had to go through that process of letting go of privilege and stuff like that. But if you'd have seen that before, they'd have been like, oh no, this doesn't really work for us. The story doesn't really understand. We don't really understand what's happening. Now they get it, but it's because of the life experiences that you've had to go through to understand that. But that's how theatre works. It's a mirror for society. So you see something, you might not be ready for it, but you still hold it. You still walk away, you still go away, and you test those ideas out in the world, and then it drops into place. And I wish a lot of writers knew that, because actually, in a sense, when you're a writer, it's almost like you're a prophet. And you're writing about things that are coming in the future, or that you might sense now, but not everybody is aware of. And that means you might have to be misunderstood for a bit, and that's okay. But actually, there will be a point in time where someone does understand your message, and the right people will access it. And that means that eventually the audience will change with that, and people will be able to come through the door with that. But it takes time. It's not just a case of it happening overnight, and that's okay. I did not expect to go there, but well, we went there in the end anyway.
Well, indeed. How have you dealt with being misunderstood?
Oh my gosh, you're asking some questions today. I love that. I am still trying to work that out, if I'm being quite frank, because I feel like, and I think it's getting better, because I think the industry is becoming more diverse, but I think there's always a fear in me that it's a one-time opportunity if I get a commission. And it's not been, because I think the past has proven that. But I'm also very scared that, let's say, for example, I have an idea for something that's quite edgy, that might push the boundaries a little bit more. It's not Shakespeare, it's not Macbeth. Then you're worried that actually, if they don't understand it first time, that they're never going to call you again. And that's a really difficult thing. So once again, I'm actually on that journey of testing out some ideas that might push the boundaries in terms of what we think of traditional theatre to be, or potentially traditional screenwriting to be. But actually, it takes a while to feel like your quirkiness is okay, or maybe once again that actually not everybody's going to understand it, but you understand that. And I think there's a creative in Coventry called Sienna Bangura, and this is one of the reasons why I admire her so much, because she believes in her work no matter what anyone says. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is the message I want to give to my community. And she does it regardless. And she just recently wrote a play called Swim Auntie Swim. And it's basically about 3 black women in a swimming pool and navigating grief, loss, joy, all those kind of themes. But she knew what she wanted to do, and it was a bit groundbreaking. There was a pool in the theatre. There was rain falling from above, and it worked. And she had that vision, and she carried it through no matter what. And there were people obviously along the way going, are you sure about this? Is this really what we want to go for? She knew it, and she did it, and executed it so well. That's where I want to be as an artist. And I'm not there yet, because I'm still in that doubt of, but we want audiences, and I want to appease this theatre company. I want to make sure that everyone's happy. But actually, as a creative, you have to be authentic in your voice and authentic in your vision. And that's how you will then establish yourself as an artist. But if you're not doing that, then you're always going to be bending to what the industry wants at the moment. And actually, that's not being true to who you are. It's not being true to that authentic voice, and actually being okay with being misunderstood along the way. And it's a journey. It's a massive journey.
It sounds like it. And I mean, what do you feel like you would need from the industry, from those that are within the industry, that actually does make you feel as though you have the space for your authenticity and your authentic voice?
I think the biggest thing missing from our industry, not necessarily just in the Midlands as well, I mean across the nation, I'd probably say is a space to play. So, because once again, as an artist, let's just say you give me a commission to direct a show, and I haven't got that much experience. That means the only time I'm going to learn is by being in that rehearsal process where you've got limited amount of time, budget as well. And if you mess up, it's all over, the stage reviews and stuff like that. That's not a safe space as an artist to grow. So actually just having a place where I could say, I'm going to bring in a script this week, and we're just going to play around with an idea. you take this away and you use it in this style of this particular theatre practitioner. Or you may have watched this anime. Experiment what that looks like in this style. Just have a go. And no one's judging you and everyone's just playing about. It's a fundamental part of human development. Why have we stopped that in creativity? And actually, that to me, I think would enrich us so much more as artists, but as adults to play. And young people definitely need it as well, because I think there's so many spaces that have once again closed down, that are now, not necessarily accessible when it comes to creativity for young people. But I think for adults in itself, just being able to just be in a room, no judgment, test out an idea. It may be absolutely stupid. It may be amazing, but just to have the space to just experiment, because that's where you become misunderstood, but no one's judging you. That's where you might have an idea that's not fully cooked, but you can test it out and it's okay. There is a space at the Hippodrome at the moment that's been started by Sophia Griffin and Grace Barrington. It's called Writer's Block. That's one of the only spaces I know in the Midlands at the moment where you can do that. And I actually tested out an idea there. It was about like financial literacy for young people in theatre. And when I did it, it wasn't great. Like, I know people didn't say necessarily it wasn't great, but in my opinion, it wasn't the best version of my work. But I felt safe. I was like, okay, you know what? This person's given me an idea about this character. This person's given me an idea about how it could be directed. And now I feel more confident to take that forward. But actually, if you're not in those spaces, you won't feel like you can just give that idea to a theatre because it's not fully cooked. And that's actually where you grow. You grow in the play. And if you don't have those spaces to do that, how do you grow? I don't know.
Do you feel that this is where there may be biases or misunderstanding or so on that sits in the industry that doesn't allow for that? Because to give an example, what you were just talking about there made me think of Baby Reindeer. And it made me think of that because the narrative and the story that we understand as the audience is, here you have a comic, a playwright, a person who has taken something and arguably played with it in a setting that he created in his one-man show and did all of that and played with it for a while until it became something that has evolved into now this quite controversial, obviously with everything going on around it, but hit series where it's somehow telling aspects of his story and possibly others and throwing out all of these different themes. But you made me think about that. It made me think, is that where some people are given permission to play and maybe others not yet, because there is still this misunderstanding of what they might be playing with?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think what's the right words to say. Because I think identity does play a big part in that, unfortunately. Because once again, there are people that do have the permission to play, and there are those that need to get things right first time. And once again, but also as well, when you mention things like Baby Reindeer, playing with things as well that also include trauma. I honestly, once again, I'm not at that space as an artist where I would do that on such a public scale. And once again, what he's done has been so incredibly brave, and just like from the feedback I've heard from different people in the industry that have watched the show and they've just felt seen, or they felt like actually it liberated them in a certain sense. But once again, but just the style and the form was very, very playful. But I don't know a lot of Black or Asian artists that would do that and feel safe to do that in a public setting. That in itself is, and once again, with their trauma as well being played out too, and people accessing that, because then you're being critiqued on so many levels. It's, oh, your trauma is being critiqued. Was it valid? Was it real? Then you've got the form. Was that the best way to do that? Could you have done it in a more safer way, a more traditional way? And there's all this kind of things that would come into play with it just based on your identity alone. And actually being able to do that as a white male, I do wonder if there is a difference there in how it would be received, just from my experience of theatre and the industry in itself.
Yeah, I think it does beg a question, and just some of the things that you're talking about in terms of what creates safety for your creativity and for your authenticity. I think it does raise questions. And I mean, I am not by any stretch a creative in the way that I'm a writer, for example. But I would imagine there is a certain amount of freedom that you have to allow yourself in order to have the capability to write. And that freedom, there can be a dichotomy with actually the environment that you're in. And it's how you manage that.
I feel like I feel like you're asking me so many questions that I've been battling with myself, because at the moment I'm like, I want to go into a period of just writing freely. But then at the same time, in my head, I need to separate myself from the industry in order to do that for a while.
Yeah.
But then I'm wondering, if you do that, then can you just then come back in, because you haven't been active, you haven't been doing all the, not necessarily like the lower scale jobs, but you're doing the jobs that keep you, kind of well recognized in the industry.
Yeah.
But then that means your energy is now separated. It's distracted.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on what you really want to focus on versus what pays the bills and what keeps you well known. And I think that's where I'm battling at the moment. Where do you find that space to just be free? And like you said, allow yourself to have the permission to do that and not feel like you are leaving the industry or you're never going to be known again. It's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing.
And again, seems like a space where a level of safety is needed, and a level of belonging is needed. Because if you feel like you belong in a space, you don't actually feel like you have to leave it in order to cultivate the craft that brings you in it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No. I think you hit on a lot of topics, absolutely. And I think there's so many artists that I know that feel that way. And there is also a financial aspect to that as well. Do you know what I mean? To have the freedom to do things means that you have to, once again, keep your light bills on. We're in a cost of living crisis still. Hopefully this new government might change things. We don't know. But at the same time, I think having that space where you could just, for example, for a year, just experiment with an idea. And you know that you can turn your lights on, you've got food in the fridge, and you know that you're taken care of on a basic level. It would make all the difference, especially to artists. I remember, for example, I was talking to a Bangladeshi artist last year, and he was basically saying that I can't just be a creative because, and first of all, in my community, whilst necessarily Bangladeshi communities love art and they appreciate a lot of creative gifts, but also as well, there is a duty for this particular person to make sure that their family is being fed, to make sure that actually the basic needs of their people in the community is being served first. Then how do you have the room to just play and be free and to grow? And even especially as a new artist as well, no one that has any connections to the industry whatsoever, how do you do that? So I actually do think there is that need for the funding, but I also do not have the answer as to where it's going to come from. And I'm not going to try and say, it needs to be this government, it needs to be this, because I actually don't know. Yeah. If it was that simple, I'm sure it would have happened by now. So there's something missing, but I'm really intrigued to know what the answer is as to how you can provide that space.
Well, indeed, but I also wonder whether it's also conversations in a way like this that help that, because it also has to be considered a priority. And I think you raise a really valid point around adult play, because I think there's a huge underestimation with that, and I think there's a thought process that is in fact I think it's one of the things that gets beaten out of us in society. Adults don't play. Everything becomes very serious, but actually in order for there to be growth, change, authenticity, stories told, all of these things, you have to be able to play. And it goes back to this basic idea of play is safety, because you can only play when you are safe.
And you know what I think? Sorry, you just give me an idea. Because I do think there's points where I look at how theatre, once again, is massively just about play. You're devising a theatre piece, you're just bringing ideas and you're experimenting. I'm just wondering, how do we then bring that back into communities and building communities? Because if there was a space, for example, there's a community issue, and you bring the process of, let's just say, devising into that space, where everyone just tests out an idea and see if it works in a very contained way, and then you can just generate ideas. Those kind of things, I think there is a symbiosis there that could be kind of activated more. But I'm intrigued to see actually how the play aspect of things just generates a different way of thinking. And I think everyone's so blocked in at the moment because they're so busy just trying to work 2 to 3 jobs, just trying to make sure that everything's taken care of.
Surviving.
That the idea of even thinking of something different that might shift a community, that might shift young people in being able to access opportunities. How do you generate it if you don't have the room to do it? Like you said, how do you need to make the room? So I think something like that, I think, would be really beneficial, both creatively and for community as well. But I just wonder where that space is.
Well, you're asking the question, so I'm sure somebody at some point will answer.
Someone's going to answer.
Hint, where's that space? Final area, if you don't mind me touching on this, is that also I know that you're a person of faith.
Yes.
And I wonder how that plays into your, I suppose, grit in terms of the journey.
Oh my good. No, I feel like you've been shadowing me for about a week.
Okay.
No, because literally, I went out with a friend yesterday, and these are all of the things we was talking about. So I'm like, this is so amazing that you get all of the points. In terms of my faith, I think the biggest thing. So there's this verse that keeps talking about if you've got talents, basically, you shouldn't necessarily just sit on the talents. You need to make sure it's spread because, when it's anything like the Christian faith, when God will see you one day in the afterlife, it's like, well, what did you do with what I gave you? What was I gave you these things for a reason. Have you utilized them? I'm not saying it's going to lead to eternal damnation, but it actually, you've been given these gifts for a reason. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm challenged with at the moment. Like, why have I been given this gift? Why have I been given the gift of being able to write? It's not just for me. If it's just for me, then once again, you can make all your money, you can do all your accolades, fine. But actually, I need to serve in that way. And I think that's what I'm trying to approach my art with and also my community work with as well. I'm here to serve. I'm here to help people tell their stories or reflect a story back that hasn't been told that will then liberate somebody else's mindset. There is something in that I've been called to do. Now, it is an ongoing journey because once again, there are points where, and I think this is the nature of the industry, that there are I think there's a lot of people who are artists that want to be seen and they want to be recognized in their own right. And you always get battle with that. Why is my name not in this flashing light? Why is my name not here? And actually, I'm not saying that's not important. There's an importance in that for somebody, but actually for me and my journey, is that the best thing for me? Or is the best thing for me to write a piece about, once again, financial literacy or about, talking about death and all these kind of things actually people are being affected with at this moment. And that could be a blockbuster thing one day, but it still serves the community because they're at the heart of it. And that, I think, is something that I think my Christian faith always brings me back to. Though the people that are in the body, and not necessarily the body of Christ, but just the body of our community, that's what's driving our stories. They are at the heart of the stories. So if I'm not serving that, then who am I serving? And I think that's the biggest thing that I have at the moment. It also helps as well that I now attend a church that is a community church. So their whole thing is about bringing the community in. And even the way they experiment with that throughout the week, through the food banks, through different life classes and things like that, I think it just inspires me because I'm like, oh, if I'm getting this nourishment here, then naturally you want to spread that. Yeah. And that's through your poetry, that's through your playwriting. And I think all those kind of things just feeds me as an artist. And I just want to then, once again, replicate that. So that means that when you write a play, and that this is my practice, if I write something or if I get an opportunity, the first thing I do then is say, okay, cool, who can I give that back to? Is it a case of I work with these young people over here? Is it a case of, for example, I popped round to there's someone called Antonio Henry. He started this company called Made CIC, and he was like, come along to the gym, we're just going to meet some young people. And I was like, okay, cool, went along. I think I was going to sit in the car to the side. No, I was pushing weights. I was doing all these things, but once again, just sitting down, spending time with young people, hearing what they're going through, that's me giving back. And and then you're like, oh, actually, if this opportunity happens at the Hippodrome, I know who you are now, I know where you are, so then I can just give you the opportunity when it comes about. But actually, that whole thing of being in community and serving always feeds back into creativity. And I think the final thing as well, which I'm thinking about quite a lot recently, is I don't make art alone. That's the biggest thing. Like, everything that I've ever done has been helped by other people. Everything from the moment I started writing, as in like with Aspire for You and with universities, with people that believed in me, I'm always listening. I'm always around people. So who am I to think that I did it all on my own? I'm always being helped from a higher power to people that are just with me on the ground. I'm always with people, and they will always be with me as well on this journey. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken from my faith to kind of like bleed back into my art, I'd probably say. I don't know how you did that. But I like it.
Well, no, thank you so much for sharing. What I hear is just an abundance. And I think that would be the word I would use, an abundance. And it is becoming clear that you have done so much and had an abundance, not just of talent, but of your way of seeing the world, that it only makes sense that you'll continue to touch it. And I think one of the biggest things that I hear you doing that I think makes that change and creates that servitude is asking questions, because we never know who's going to answer them, although, you know, they should be watching right now. We don't know who's going to answer them, but we know that if you're asking the question, it will be answered. Ashlee, thank you. That was really powerful and very much appreciated. And thank you for being so open and honest.
Thank you.
That's the end of this episode. Please do come back for another one where we'll have more enlightening conversation, I'm sure, and open your minds and hearts, all being well, to things that we can do to continue to serve the needs of our communities. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to keep up to date with all things leading communities. You can follow Aspire for You at A4UCIC. To follow That's All Media, search at That's All Media. You can also join us on Facebook at Leading Communities Podcast.